Barack Obama.
Yep.
We need full-blown government censorship to eradicate independent media.
What?
Yes.
What?
I mean, that's amazing.
God,
This man is a constitutional
Nick is like,
professor.
That's not an actual quote, but
no, that's what they.
That's how they
surmise.
That's how he didn't put it that way.
That's Trump level saying out loud.
No, he wouldn't say that out loud. No. They you know.
I need you to quote, bro.
Harvard Law School teaches you a little bit better than that, right? So, but we covered this. I mean, he spoke to. This was a couple of weeks ago. We covered this, but he gave a video. Sort of Zoom address to, I think it was the Columbia Journalism School, talking about, you know, this very same thing, how, you know, the role of the press is to, you know, make it clear the line between fact and opinion and truth and untruth, and obviously what the subtext of all of that was. And in his actual quote here, I read this article, I think yesterday, I forget what the actual quote was, but it was actually a lot closer to their like satirical sort of paraphrase quote here that they use for the headline. No, the way Obama views democracy is the way a lot of his ilk do, which is that you're free to make choices as long as those choices are of little to no consequence. That's one of George Carlin's best quotes. He says, the American people are made to feel free through the exercise of meaningless choices, right? And that's it. So, you know, the media's job, in his view, we now have a divided conversation in part because we have a divided media, right? That's the actual quote. And he actually goes on. But the point of what he's saying is that it is the job of the media to set the parameters of the conversation, to set the boundaries of the debate. You know, on the left side, we can't go too far. On the right side, we can't go too far. And look, I mean, one of the things, I mean, obviously, this is very much fundamentally an anti-democratic thing to say. But the kind of democracy that Obama believes in and that the political establishment really sells to the people as real democracy, even though it isn't, does require a sort of gentleman's agreement on the part of both sides not to actually stir people up to the point where they may overturn that system. And that's one of the reasons why they hated Trump. That's the main reason they hated Trump, and it's the main reason why they hated Sanders, because when you actually bring popular ideas into the conversation, you're sort of breaking the unwritten rule of we're not going to go there, because populism can take on two forms, broadly speaking. It can take on the form of socialism or the form of fascism. And they're really uncomfortable with both. Now, you could say we have a form of soft fascism. Absolutely. We have the brand of fascism that, you know, Obama is perfectly comfortable with, that Mitt Romney is perfectly comfortable with, this sort of soft corporate fascism. That's one more George Carlin quote. He says, you know, the old saying that when fascism comes here, it will be, you know, carrying a cross. He says, no, when fascism comes here, it will be dressed in consumer products. It'll be smiley faces and Happy Meals and things like that. That's a form of fascism, obviously, but it's not the kind that they're comfortable with. You know, the sort of hard right fascism and the, you know, in their mind, far left, I won't even say socialism, far left social democracy in their view. Those are threats. Those are threats. And people who espouse those views are breaking the unwritten rule. You don't go there. You have to stay in bounds, because as long as you're in bounds, we can more or less control either outcome. And Trump broke that rule. Bernie broke that rule to a lesser extent, unfortunately. But that's what their real concern is when they talk like this.
Whoa, is that Obama? He really looks different. What the hell happened to him?
He got articulated in his old age.
Let's listen to what he say. He verbalized parts of this interview here, so let's listen to it, and then we'll read some other parts of this breakdown here. Don't do me like that. Hold on, everybody. Let's click it again and see if it works this time. Let's refresh it. All right, so now let's see.
Obama must be haunted by the ghosts of all the Syrian and living children he's responsible for.
Chances are, man, all those drone bombings were 100% innocent civilians because, hey, in case you weren't paying attention, folks, finally corporate media said, oh, yeah, that drone bomb that killed that Al-Qaeda leader. Yeah, he was just a simple farmer. Simple farmer willing to bet 10 out of 10, 100% chance, spot on, that all the drone bombings that happened under Obama, all of those were innocent civilians who were farmers or engineers or anything of that nature. None of them were
I'm an
terrorists.
optimistic man.
Sorry,
but I find
here we go. I
myself
think it works now.
falling into this space where I have concern about the country that they will inherit once I'm gone. Post-presidency, what about this country keeps you up at night?
The thing that I'm most worried about is the degree to which we now have a divided conversation. In part
which you
because we have a
helped
divided
create.
media, right? So I'm much older than you, Nate.
You don't look it, though.
That's what I was fishing for. But when I was coming up, you had 3 TV stations.
Yeah.
And people were getting a similar sense of what is true and what isn't, what was real and what was not. Today, what I'm most concerned about is the fact that because of the splintering of the media, we almost occupy different realities. If something happens in the past, everybody
what I'm
would say,
concerned
we may
about
disagree
now
on
is
how
people
to
might
solve it,
go
but
to alternative media sources to find actual truth as opposed to digesting the bullshit that's on, channel 4, 5, 7, 9, whatever.
Okay, well, this is the problem with this take, because on the face of it, he's not saying anything that I think a lot of us haven't said, right? Mm-hmm. That we have this bifurcated media. This is Taibbi's whole thesis, right? That you used to have a certain standard of journalism that he doesn't argue was driven by principle. He argues the commercial incentives were different, that the famed journalistic objectivity was driven by the idea that you want to appeal to everybody. So if you take a political position, you lose Republican readers of your newspaper, right? If you take a liberal position, so you wanted to go down the middle and just do a just the facts, ma'am, kind of a product. He's not wrong as far as that goes. But what he's saying, because of who he is and the perspective he has, is not that he wants a restoration of the media of old that had an antagonistic relationship very often to elites and to power. What he wants is a grape drink version of that. He wants a media that's unified around facts that are signed off on by people like him.
Right.
That's what he's actually talking about. He's talking about a media that doesn't question elite narratives. He's not really talking about a return to objective standards of journalism.
Exactly.
Right. He wants the media back that blew smoke up his ass when he ran for president. There wasn't much of a YouTube space back then. There wasn't much of a podcast space back then. There weren't annoying assholes like us doing shows like this back then, And obviously,
he wants Chris Matthews' leg trembling.
Yeah, right.
So incredible charisma.
So what I want to add on here is, okay, so when Barack Obama got into office, he did use a little bit of social media. And, of course, corporate media was there to hold his hand and give him a cookie and a nice glass of milk after a debate with Hillary Clinton. He was pampered, and the American people fell in love with the idea of Barack Obama. So all the things that he's talking about, look, what he wants is something that never even existed under his presidency, because everyone was so happy that finally, George Bush Jr. is gone, and here we got this better president here in power.
Right.
But see, the thing about what Barack Obama wants further is it's not only our silence, but it's the silence of free thought, of people not challenging the two-party system and just assuming that everything's going to be okay with the people in power and the media is going to stick to the facts. The media hasn't been able to stick to the facts since even before Bill Clinton's administration. But even then, with Bill Clinton's administration, you did have the Telecoms Act, which helped create this nightmare that we're in. What he's crying about, he willingly turned a blind eye under his administration. And so now we have this nightmare that our politicians helped create, specifically the Democrats. Bill Clinton, you know, remember Barack Obama when you faced off against Bill Clinton's wife, Hillary Clinton, who became your Secretary of State, who you then allowed to commit election fraud during the final days of your presidency when Bernie Sanders was denied the nomination. So all the stuff that Obama is crying and trying to say, I just wish things were simpler. It's all it is just him trying to manufacture, you know, silent, obedient consent from the people because, here Barack Obama is saying, let's go back to simpler times. Those simpler times never existed. Same thing like those people who want the 1950s to come back. The 1950s weren't that golden of an era. Maybe for a certain group of people, yeah. But for a vast majority of other Americans, no, it wasn't. Sometimes when you look back in history, it wasn't as great as people make it seem.
So one thing that's very telling here, do you guys remember when Mika Brzezinski from Morning Joe said that it's our job in the media to control how people think?
Yep.
That was the most telling thing anyone ever said on TV. That's because that was Barack Obama is complaining about. Because our last story, we showed you guys how Democrats are losing the culture war on a plethora of issues. So Barack Obama is decrying that we do not live in an era where the media tells people what to think. Even during the 70s and 80s, the media told people what to fucking think. MLK was largely hated at his time because the media told him to hate him. Despite what people say now, Muhammad Ali was hated by white America because when he refused to fight in Vietnam, the media ripped him to shreds. And throughout the 70s and 80s, America was extremely anti-communist. Why? Because the media told them to be. They told
people forget it now. Fraser was like the good one.
Yeah.
Who was going to beat the bad one. It's true. That's totally forgotten today.
Yeah, absolutely, Russell. And the point being, we can finish the video as well after this. The point being is Barack Obama is decrying that they don't have that power. They do have power over large segments of the population, apparently 25% Democrat, but they don't have the large sweeping majority that the Uniparty used to have. Anyway, I think I'm at a point. CJ, you can finish the video, and you guys.
At least we all agree that, that's an issue. Now, people will say, well, that didn't happen, or I don't believe that. And one of, I think, the goals of the Obama Foundation and
people will say, like, the Uyghur genocide didn't happen. That's what he's talking about. He's not referring to what he's actually saying in the video. That's what he's referring to Russell's point.
one of the goals of my post-presidency is how do we return to that common conversation? How can we have a common set of facts? We may disagree on gun violence in terms of what the best prescriptions are, but we can't deny the data that says the United States has levels of gun violence that are 5, 10, 15 times more than other countries.
Hey, shit lives. Do you guys think it's a coincidence that the United States is the biggest arms dealer that the human race has ever seen, the most violent state the human race has ever seen? We have an unhinged police force the likes the human race has never seen. But we have a high amount of gun violence. Why do you guys think that is? You guys think there's no trickle-down effect?
I think what's going on here is that the Democrats throughout the decades, really, especially though in the, Obama era leading through the Trump era, they have cultivated a base that responds to the kind of media that Barack Obama is nostalgic for in that interview. And they know that that base is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, right? So even though they've been able to win, whatever it is, 3 out of the last 4 national elections, right? 18, 20, or 2 out of 3. They sense that that influence is waning, right? They can kind of see the writing on the wall. Okay, as the media that our people consume becomes less relevant, more and more people are going to go outside that media system and they're going to absorb narratives that we don't want them absorbing, and then it's going to be impossible for us to win. That's why they have no bench. That's why Joe Biden ended up their nominee in 2020, because they don't really have anybody who appeals to a broader set of people with a broader set of ideas. Right? They're just kind of stuck with this dying brand and all of these dying, you know, sort of avatars who rep this dying brand. They don't really see anything in the way of the future. Going back to RFK, RFK does kind of represent that. RFK entertains these indie media channels. He goes on, you know, Kim Iverson. He goes on the Breaking Points thing, right? Like, he's going outside of their comfort zone. Whereas, you know, I mean, look, even Bernie during 2016, you had to twist his arm to get him to go on like TYT. Like, you know, like the Democrats just don't do that. You know, they act as if this whole space does not exist, even though internet media is blowing, you know, network TV out of the water in terms of actual views and users.
LC heard Jen Psaki got a podcast and couldn't wait to make an appearance.
Yeah.
Couldn't wait.